My husband left me for his secretary and took every penny I had. I sold my wedding ring to buy a train ticket. At the station, when I saw a man shivering from the cold, I gave him my last 15 so he could eat something warm. 2 days later, a limousine stopped in front of the shelter where I was sleeping, and the driver said my name. I am glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you are watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. The divorce papers felt heavier than they should have in my trembling hands. 27 years of marriage reduced to cold legal language on cream-colored paper. I sat in my lawyer's office staring at Martin's signature. So confident, so final, while mine remained a blank line waiting to seal my fate. Mrs. Mitchell, my attorney said, his voice gentle but firm. Your husband has been very thorough. The joint accounts, the savings, even the retirement fund, everything had been transferred or liquidated legally since many assets were in his name. I stopped listening. The words became white noise as I watched snow begin to fall outside the window. At 53, I was starting over with nothing. Martin had planned this meticulously while I trusted him completely. 27 years of believing we were partners, and I was just the fool who never saw it coming. The secretary. Her name was Brittany, and she was 27. I had met her at the company Christmas party just 6 months ago. She had complimented my dress with such sincerity that I had actually liked her. The irony burned in my throat like acid. The house will be sold to pay off the debts he accumulated. The lawyer continued. You will have approximately 48 hours to collect your personal belongings. I nodded mechanically, my mind still trying to process how Martin had managed to destroy our entire life while I was planning our upcoming 29th anniversary celebration. I had been researching cruise destinations while he was planning my financial execution. Walking out of that office, I felt like a ghost. People passed by on the sidewalk living their normal lives while mine crumbled around me. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister Donna. How did it go? Call me. I could not call her. Not yet. Donna had warned me about Martin's recent behavior, his late nights at the office, his sudden interest in working out and buying new clothes. I had defended him, called her paranoid. The shame of being so wrong felt worse than the betrayal itself. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of packing boxes and confronting the reality of my situation. Friends who I thought cared suddenly became unavailable. Apparently, word travels fast in small towns, and being the abandoned wife of a respected businessman made me a social pariah. Overnight, Martin came by on the last day to collect some items. He looked younger, somehow dressed in clothes I had never seen before. Expensive clothes that Brittany had probably picked out. Karen, you have to understand, he started, but I held up my hand. No, Martin, I do not have to understand anything. Just take what you came for and leave. He grabbed a few photo albums and his golf trophies. 27 years together, and that was what mattered to him. Not the family pictures where we looked happy. Not the wedding album I had cherished, just his golf trophies. You will be fine, he said as he headed toward the door. You are stronger than you think. I almost laughed at the absurdity. He had systematically destroyed my life and then had the audacity to give me a pep talk, but I did not respond. I would not give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. After he left, I sat in our empty living room, my empty living room, and finally allowed myself to cry. Deep, wrenching sobs that came from a place I did not know existed. I grieved not just for my marriage, but for the woman I had been, the trusting woman who believed in happily ever after. I had exactly $2,500 to my name. The wedding ring on my finger was the only thing of value I had left. It was a beautiful ring, 2 carats in a vintage setting, that had belonged to Martin's grandmother. The irony was not lost on me that the only valuable thing I possessed was a symbol of the love that had destroyed me. The pawn shop owner barely looked up when I walked in. "What can I do for you?" I slipped the ring off my finger for the last time. It left a pale band of skin that looked like a scar. "I need to sell this." He examined it under his jeweler's loupe, turning it this way and that. "Nice piece, vintage setting. I can give you $900. $900 for 27 years of believing I was loved." It seemed about right. "I will take it," I said. With my ring money and my savings, I bought a one-way train ticket to Minneapolis. I had never been to Minnesota, but it seemed far enough away from the life that had imploded around me, far enough away from the whispers and the pitying looks. The train station was nearly empty when I arrived that evening. A fierce snowstorm had begun, the kind that makes the world disappear behind a curtain of white. I clutched my single suitcase and purse, everything I owned, reduced to what I could carry. That was when I saw him. An elderly man sat on a bench near the vending machines, wearing a thin coat that provided little protection against the cold. He was probably in his 70s, with silver hair and kind eyes that seemed lost. His hands shook. Whether from cold or age, I could not tell. As he searched through his pockets, I should have minded my own business. I had exactly $11.40 left after buying my ticket and a small bottle of water. 15 would have to last until I figured out what to do in Minneapolis. But watching him shiver in that inadequate coat, I could not walk away. "Excuse me?" I said, approaching him slowly. "Are you all right?" He looked up with startled eyes, as if he was not used to strangers speaking to him. "Oh yes, I am fine. Just waiting for my train." But he was not fine. I could see it in the way he held himself, the defeat in his shoulders. It was a posture I recognized because I had been wearing it myself for days. "It is awfully cold tonight," I said, sitting down beside him. "Have you eaten anything?" He shook his head slightly. "I seem to have misplaced my wallet, but my train comes in a few hours. I will be fine." Something about the way he said it, the quiet dignity, mixed with obvious need, reminded me of my father. Dad had been proud like that, the kind of man who would rather go hungry than ask for help. I reached into my purse and pulled out my last $15 bill. The paper felt fragile between my fingers, representing the difference between having something and having nothing at all. "Please," I said, holding it out to him. "There is a coffee shop across the street. Get yourself something warm to eat." His eyes widened. "Oh no, I could not. You are very kind, but please," I repeated. "It would make me feel better knowing you are warm and fed." He studied my face for a long moment, and I saw something shift in his expression. Surprise, maybe? Or recognition of one kind soul reaching out to another in a moment of darkness. "Thank you," he said quietly, accepting the money. "You have no idea what this means to me." As he walked away into the swirling snow, I felt something I had not experienced in weeks. Peace, not happiness. I was still broken and lost and terrified of what came next. But for just a moment, I had been able to help someone else, and that felt like enough. My train arrived an hour later, and I did not see the old man again. As we pulled away from the station, I pressed my face to the window and watched the town disappear into the storm. I was leaving with nothing, heading toward an uncertain future. But somehow, that act of kindness had given me something I had lost in the wreckage of my marriage. Hope. Hope that there was still goodness in the world, even when everything else fell apart. Little did I know that those 15 would change everything. Minneapolis in January was unforgiving. The cold bit through my thin coat like teeth, and the wind carried snow that stung my face as I stepped off the train. I had imagined this moment differently, maybe feeling liberated, ready for a fresh start. Instead, I felt like a lost child in a city that seemed determined to swallow me whole. The train station was warmer than the streets, but I could not stay there forever. With 85 cents in my pocket and nowhere to go, I did something I had never imagined I would have to do. I asked for directions to the nearest homeless shelter. About 8 blocks north, the information desk clerk told me, her voice professional, but not unkind. "But you might want to hurry. They stop intake at 9 o'clock. 8 blocks. In normal circumstances, that would be a pleasant walk. But carrying everything I owned in a suitcase with snow falling steadily and the temperature dropping those 8 blocks felt like a marathon. The Minneapolis City Mission sat on a corner that had seen better days. The building was solid, but worn with yellow light spilling from windows that promised warmth. A small sign by the door read, "All are welcome." Those 3 words nearly brought me to tears. Inside, the smell hit me first, industrial disinfectant mixed with cooking food and too many people in too small a space. The lobby buzzed with quiet activity as staff members processed the evening's arrivals. First time asked the woman behind the intake desk. She was probably my age, with graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and eyes that had seen everything but still held compassion. I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Name, Karen Mitchell." She handed me a clipboard with forms. "Fill these out. We will get you set up with a bed and a meal. Breakfast is at 7, and you will need to be out by 8 a.m., but you can come back for dinner and overnight again." The questions on the form were straightforward, but humbling. Emergency contact, I left that blank. Previous address, I wrote down the house that was no longer mine. Reason for homelessness. I stared at that line for a long time before writing simply divorce. The dormitory was a large room filled with cots, each one representing someone's lowest point. Women of all ages, some younger than my daughter would have been if Martin and I had been blessed with children, others old enough to be my mother. Each carrying her own story of how life had brought her here. My assigned cot was between a woman who could not have been older than 25 and another who might have been 60. The younger woman, Emily, had kind eyes and introduced herself as she helped me figure out the sheet situation. "First night is always the hardest," she said quietly. "You learn the routine quickly, though. Keep your valuables in your pillowcase. Do not leave anything on the floor. And try not to take anything personally. People here are dealing with a lot." The woman on my other side. Patricia had been at the shelter for 4 weeks. "Lost my apartment when my disability check got messed up," she explained. "Bureaucracy moves slow, but hunger moves fast. You know, that first night I lay awake listening to the sounds of 30 women trying to find peace in a place that offered shelter but not true rest. Some cried quietly, others snored. A few whispered prayers into the darkness. I found myself thinking about the old man at the train station, hoping he had found somewhere warm to sleep. The next morning came too early. 7 a.m. breakfast was oatmeal toast and coffee that was strong enough to wake the dead. I sat with Emily and Patricia, learning the unspoken rules of shelter life. Where to go during the day when you had no job to report to, which libraries stayed open the longest, which churches served free lunches. "You got any skills?" Patricia asked. "The job search is hard when you do not have an address, but some places are understanding." I almost laughed. 27 years as a homemaker, volunteering at charity events, and managing a household. What did that translate to in the real world? I am not sure I admitted. Days blurred together. I walked the streets looking for work, but every application asked for an address, a phone number, and references. I was caught in the cruel cycle of needing a job to get housing and needing housing to get a job. My 85 cents had quickly become nothing, and I relied entirely on the shelter's meals, and whatever free food I could find. The other women became my unlikely family. Emily was saving for nursing school while working at a fast food place that paid under the table. Patricia had been a teacher before chronic illness derailed her life. Each had dreams deferred but not destroyed. On my third night, I was settling into my cot when commotion erupted near the front desk. Through the dormitory door, I could see lights flashing outside, red and blue like police cars. My heart raced. Had something happened? Were we in trouble? But then I heard one of the staff members calling my name. Karen Mitchell. Is there a Karen Mitchell here? Emily nudged me. That is you, is it not? I stood on shaky legs and made my way to the front desk. Through the windows, I could see not police cars, but a sleek black limousine parked outside. The vehicle looked so out of place in this neighborhood that it might as well have been a spaceship. Ma'am, said the staff member, a young man whose name tag read Marcus, there is someone here to see you. To see me? My voice cracked. Are you sure? A man in a crisp black suit stepped through the front door, brushing snow from his shoulders. He was probably in his 50s, with silver-streaked hair, and the bearing of someone accustomed to being in charge. His eyes scanned the room until they found me. Mrs. Mitchell. I nodded, confused and a little frightened. My name is Thomas Reed. I am here on behalf of someone you helped a few days ago, someone who would very much like to speak with you. The room had gone quiet. Every person in the lobby was staring at us at the impossible scene of a woman in shelter clothes being summoned by a man who clearly belonged to a different world entirely. I am sorry, I said, but I think there has been a mistake. I have not helped anyone who... I stopped. The train station. The old man. The 15 I had given him when I had almost nothing myself. There is no mistake, Thomas said gently. Would you be willing to come with me? I assure you, you are in no trouble. Quite the opposite. Emily appeared at my elbow. You do not have to go anywhere with anyone, she said protectively. Do you want me to call the police? I looked at Thomas's face, trying to read his intentions. There was something sincere in his expression, something that reminded me of the old man's quiet dignity. It is about the gentleman at the train station, is it not? I asked. Thomas smiled, the first genuine smile I had seen in what felt like years. Yes, ma'am. Mr. Charles Whitmore has been quite anxious to find you. He has something he would like to discuss. Mr. Whitmore. So that was his name. I looked around the shelter, at the women who had become my temporary family, at the life I had been building from scraps and determination. Will you bring me back? I asked quietly. If that is what you wish, Thomas replied. But I think you might want to hear what Mr. Whitmore has to say first. Patricia shuffled over and squeezed my hand. Honey, sometimes angels come in unexpected packages. Maybe it is time to see what this is about. I gathered my few belongings, it did not take long, and followed Thomas out into the cold night. The limousine was warm and luxurious, beyond anything I had ever experienced. Leather seats, soft lighting, and classical music playing quietly from hidden speakers. As we pulled away from the shelter, I watched it disappear in the rear window. 2 days ago, I had walked through those doors broken and desperate. Now I was riding in a limousine toward an unknown future, all because I had given my last $15 to a stranger who looked cold and hungry. Whatever was waiting for me, I knew my life was about to change again. I just prayed it would be for the better this time. The limousine glided through Minneapolis' upscale neighborhoods, past houses that glowed with warm light and prosperity. I pressed my face to the tinted window, watching a world I had once belonged to, but now felt like a tourist, observing from the outside. Where are we going? I asked Thomas, my voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Whitmore's home, he replied. He is quite eager to see you again." 20 minutes later, we turned through massive iron gates that opened silently as we approached. The driveway curved through landscaped grounds that even in winter looked meticulously maintained. When the house came into view, I actually gasped. It was not just large, it was magnificent. A stone mansion that looked like it belonged in an English countryside with tall windows glowing golden against the night sky. This was not new money trying to impress. This was old wealth that did not need to prove anything to anyone, Mrs. Mitchell Thomas said as we stopped in front of the main entrance. "Before we go in, I want you to know that Mr. Whitmore is a very private man. What happened at the train station meant more to him than you could possibly imagine." The front door opened before we could knock, revealing the old man from the train station. But he looked completely different now. Gone was the thin coat and the defeated posture. He stood straight and dignified, wearing an expensive sweater and wool slacks. His silver hair was neatly combed, and his eyes, those same kind eye, shelled a warmth that made my chest tighten with emotion. "Karen," he said, and just hearing him say my name with such genuine pleasure nearly undid me. "Thank you for coming. Please come in out of the cold." The foyer was breathtaking. Marble floors, a crystal chandelier, and a sweeping staircase that belonged in a movie. But what struck me most was how warm it felt despite its grandeur. Family photographs lined the walls, and fresh flowers sat on antique tables. "I am Charles Whitmore," he said, extending his hand. "And I owe you an enormous debt of gratitude." "Mr. Whitmore, I do not understand. You do not owe me anything. It was just 15. His eyes crinkled at the corners. "Just 15. Come, let us sit by the fire, and I will explain everything." He led me to a library that was like something from a dream, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, leather chairs positioned around a crackling fireplace, and the smell of old books and polished wood. He gestured for me to sit in one of the chairs while he settled into the one across from me. "First, I want to apologize for the deception," he began. "What you saw at the train station, that was not exactly who I am." I studied his face, trying to reconcile this distinguished gentleman with the lost-looking man I had encountered 2 days ago. "Who are you?" I asked softly. Charles leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled. "I am what you might call a very wealthy man, Karen. I made my fortune in real estate development and investments, but wealth, I have learned, can be both a blessing and a curse." He stood and walked to the mantelpiece where a large photograph showed him with a beautiful woman who appeared to be about my age. She had kind eyes and a radiant smile. "That is my wife. Margaret Ann was my wife. She passed away 8 months ago. The foundation was named in her honor, the Margaret Whitmore Foundation for Community Services." The pain in his voice was unmistakable, and I felt my heart clench in sympathy. "I am so sorry. 44 years of marriage." He continued, his voice thick with emotion. "She was everything good in my life. Margaret Ann had this incredible ability to see the best in people, to believe that kindness still existed in the world, even when evidence suggested otherwise." He turned back to me, and I saw tears glistening in his eyes. "After she died, I became lost bitter even. I started to believe that people only cared about money, that genuine kindness was extinct. I began to hate what my wealth represented because it seemed to bring out the worst in the people around me." I shifted forward in my chair, drawn into his story, despite my confusion about why he was sharing it with me. 4 weeks ago, he continued. I had what I suppose you would call a breakdown. I told Thomas I needed to get away, to see if there was any goodness left in the world. So I put on old clothes, took no identification, no credit cards, nothing that would identify me as Charles Whitmore. I wanted to see how people would treat me when I had nothing to offer them. My breath caught as understanding began to dawn. For 4 weeks, I wandered through different cities, different neighborhoods. I visited shelters, sat in parks, stood on street corners. Do you know what I discovered? His voice turned bitter. People walked past me as if I were invisible. Not one person offered help. Not one person even made eye contact. I began to think Margaret Ann had been wrong, that kindness really was dead. He moved closer to my chair, his eyes intense. And then I met you at that train station. Mr. Whitmore, you were clearly struggling yourself. He interrupted gently. I could see it in your posture and the way you held that single suitcase like it contained everything you owned. You had every reason to ignore me, to focus on your own problems, but instead, you sat down beside me. You talked to me like I was a human being worth caring about. I thought back to that moment, remembering the defeated way he had held himself. You reminded me of my father, I said softly. He was proud, like that, too proud to ask for help, even when he needed it. Charles's eyes softened. And then you gave me your last 15. Thomas has since confirmed that you had exactly 85 cents left after giving me that money. You literally gave me everything you had. The room fell silent except for the crackling of the fire. I felt overwhelmed, unable to process what he was telling me. But why, I finally asked. Why was it so important to you? Charles returned to his chair, leaning forward earnestly. Because in that moment, you proved Margaret Ann right. You proved that kindness is not dead, that there are still people in this world who will help a stranger simply because it is the right thing to do. You saved more than my faith in humanity, Karen. You quite literally saved my life. I do not understand, I whispered. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. I was planning to end it all. That night at the train station was supposed to be my last test. If no one showed me kindness, if no one proved that good people still existed, I was going to, well, it does not matter now, because you did show me kindness. You gave me hope. The weight of his words hit me like a physical blow. My simple act of compassion had saved a man's life. I started to cry. Not the gentle tears I had been fighting back, but deep, overwhelming sobs. Oh, my dear, Charles said, moving to kneel beside my chair. I did not mean to upset you. You do not understand, I managed between sobs. These past few weeks, I have felt so useless, so worthless. My husband left me with nothing, and I started to believe that maybe I really was worthless, that maybe I had never mattered to anyone. Charles handed me a handkerchief real linen monogrammed with his initials. You matter, Karen. You matter so much that you changed the entire course of my life with a single act of kindness. I wiped my eyes and looked around the magnificent room at this man who commanded respect and resources I could not imagine. What happens now? I asked quietly. Charles smiled. And for the first time since I had walked into his home, he looked like the lost man I had met at the train station. That depends on you, he said. I have a proposition. But first, I want you to know that you owe me nothing. You have already given me everything: my life, my hope, my faith. Anything I offer you now is simply my way of trying to balance the scales. What kind of proposition? I asked quietly. I run a charitable foundation, Charles explained. The Margaret Whitmore Foundation for Community Services. We fund homeless shelters, job training programs, food banks, programs that help people rebuild their lives. Margaret Ann started it, and I have continued her work. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I have been managing it from a distance through accountants and lawyers. But I think Margaret Ann would have wanted someone with real experience, someone who understands what it means to need help to run the day-to-day operations. My heart began to race. You are offering me a job? I am offering you a purpose if you want it, Charles said warmly. A chance to help other people the way you helped me. The position comes with a salary of $80,000 per year, full benefits, and a small apartment above the foundation's offices. $80,000. It was more money than I had ever imagined making on my own. But more than that, it was a chance to matter again, to use my pain to help other people heal. Why me? I asked softly. You could hire anyone, someone with credentials and experience. Charles' smile was gentle but firm. Because you understand what it means to lose everything and still find compassion for others. Because when you had nothing, you gave everything. That is not something you can learn in school, Karen. That is something you carry in your heart. I looked around the beautiful room, thinking of the shelter I had left behind, of Emily, Patricia, and all the other women trying to rebuild their lives from nothing. This felt like a dream too good to be true. Can I ask you something? I said. Anything. That night at the train station, if I had not helped you, would you really have? Charles was quiet for a long moment. I do not know. I would like to think I would have found another way. But I was in a very dark place. What I do know is that your kindness brought me back to the light. You reminded me that Margaret Ann's vision of the world, a world where people take care of each other, is worth fighting for. I thought about Martin Zero, about how he had destroyed my life and left me with nothing but 85 cents and a heart full of pain. But maybe, just maybe, he had actually set me free to become the person I was meant to be. I accept. I said, my voice steady for the first time in weeks. I accept your offer. Charles' face lit up with genuine joy. Margaret Ann would have loved you, he said softly. She always said that angels do not always have wings. Sometimes they just have kind hearts, and 15 they cannot afford to give away. As I sat in that beautiful library, surrounded by the warmth of the fire and the promise of a new beginning, I realized that my lowest moment had led me to my highest one. Sometimes the end of one story is just the beginning of something beautiful. 6 weeks into my new life, I was standing in the Margaret Whitmore Foundation for Community Services office, reviewing applications for emergency housing assistance when Thomas knocked on my door. Mrs. Mitchell, there is someone here to see you. He says he is your husband. My pen slipped from my fingers, leaving an ink blot on the application I had been reading. My ex-husband, I corrected automatically, my heart already racing. Martin. Through my office window, I could see him in the waiting area. He looked older somehow, worn around the edges in a way that expensive clothes could not hide. His hair was thinner than I remembered, and there were new lines around his eyes. But what struck me most was his posture, uncertain, almost nervous. This was not the confident man who had walked out of our marriage with such arrogant finality. Would you like me to ask him to leave? Thomas offered. He had become protective of me over the past month, treating me with a respect I was still learning to accept. No, I said, surprising myself with my calm tone. I will see him, but please stay nearby. Martin entered my office with the forced smile he used to use on difficult clients. His eyes swept over the elegant space, the mahogany desk, the leather chairs, the certificates of appreciation from various charities already hanging on the walls. Karen, you look good. His voice carried a note of surprise that irritated me more than it should have. "Thank you. What do you want, Martin?" He settled into the chair across from my desk without being invited. Can a man not visit his wife, his ex-wife, without having an ulterior motive? I leaned back in my chair, studying him. 27 years of marriage had taught me to read his tells, the way he adjusted his wedding ring, which he was still wearing. I noticed the slight twitch at the corner of his mouth when he was preparing to lie, the overly casual tone that meant he was about to ask for something significant. "How did you find me?" I asked. "It was not easy. You disappeared completely after." He gestured, vaguely unable or unwilling to say, "after I destroyed your life. But then a friend of mine in Minneapolis mentioned seeing your name in the newspaper. Something about a charity foundation. Of course, last week, the Minneapolis Star-Tribune had run a feature about the foundation's new programs for homeless women. Charles had insisted on including my photo despite my protests about privacy. So you decided to pay me a visit," I said. Martin shifted in his chair, and I caught a glimpse of something I had never seen in him before. Desperation. "Karen, I have made some mistakes." "Mistakes?" The word came out sharper than I intended. "You emptied our bank accounts, left me with nothing, and moved in with your secretary." "Those were not mistakes, Martin. Those were choices." His face flushed. "Brittany and I, that is over. Has been for weeks now." I felt nothing at this revelation, no satisfaction, no vindication, just a mild curiosity about why he thought I would care. "I am sorry to hear that," I said, and I was surprised to realize I meant it. Not because I wanted him back, but because I had learned that pain was pain, regardless of who was experiencing it. "The thing is," Martin continued, his voice taking on the persuasive tone he used to use when charming clients, "I have been doing a lot of thinking about us, about what I threw away." "Martin, let me finish," he interrupted, leaning forward, his eyes intense. "I know I hurt you. I know I made terrible choices. But seeing you here, seeing what you have accomplished, it reminds me of the woman I fell in love with 30 years ago. 30 years ago. Before the disappointment of children who never came. Before the slow erosion of intimacy. Before he decided I was not enough anymore. You left me with nothing," I said quietly. "You made sure I could not even afford to eat. Do you understand what that did to me?" Martin's face crumpled with what looked like genuine remorse. I was angry, confused. I thought I do not know what I thought. That you would be fine. That you would land on your feet. You were always the strong one. I ended up in a homeless shelter, Martin. The words hit him like a physical blow. He actually recoiled, his face going pale. What? A homeless shelter. 3 days sleeping on a cot, eating charity meals, trying to figure out how to rebuild a life you had systematically destroyed. Karen, I had no idea. Of course you did not. You were too busy playing house with Brittany to care what happened to the woman you had been married to for 27 years. Martin was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. When he looked up, there were tears in his eyes. I want to make it right. You cannot. I can try. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded document. I had my lawyer draw this up. It is a financial settlement, more than fair. It gives you half of everything I have left. I did not touch the papers. What do you mean, everything you have left? Martin's laugh was bitter. Turns out, 27-year-olds are expensive. Even after taking everything from me, the money didn't last. Brittany's spending was faster than his earnings. Brittany had very particular tastes, the sports car, the luxury apartment, the shopping trips. It all added up fast. And when she realized the money was running out quicker than expected, she decided I was not quite the catch she thought I was. So that was it. Brittany had left him when the financial wells started running dry. And now he was here trying to win back the woman he had discarded. The irony would have been funny if it had not been so pathetic. "I am not your backup plan," I said quietly. "Karen, that is not what this is," but his tone suggested otherwise. "I have missed you," he said. "Missed us. What we had was real, even if I forgot that for a while." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the street below, where people hurried past in their daily lives. A few months ago, I had been one of them, lost, desperate, invisible. Now I had purpose, respect, a future I was building for myself. What we had was real once I agreed. But you killed it when you chose to betray everything we had built together. People make mistakes. People change. "You are right," I said, turning back to face him. "I have changed. I am not the same woman who depended on you for everything, who built her entire identity around being your wife. I like who I am now, Martin. I like the life I am building." Martin stood as well, moving closer. "But imagine what we could build together. You are clearly successful here, this foundation, this position. And I still have resources, connections. We could be a team again. A team, as if we had ever truly been partners, rather than him being the star and me the supporting player." "I notice you are still wearing your wedding ring," I observed. Martin looked down at his hand, as if surprised to see the gold band there. "I never took it off. Even with Brittany, part of me always knew I had made a mistake. But you did not come looking for me until now," I said evenly. "Until Brittany left you, and the money started running out." His face reddened. "That is not—" "It is exactly what this is," I interrupted. I moved back to my desk, putting the solid wood between us. "You did not miss me, Martin. You missed the convenience of having someone who would put up with anything, who would make your life easier without asking for much in return. That is not fair." "Is it not?" I sat down, feeling suddenly tired. For 27 years, I accommodated your career, your hobbies, your friends, your family. I rearranged my life around yours so completely that I forgot I even had preferences of my own. And when you decided you wanted something new and exciting, you threw me away like I was disposable." Martin sank back into his chair, the fight going out of him. "What do you want me to say? That I am sorry? I am. That I was wrong? I was. That I love you? I do." "Do you?" I asked softly. "Or do you love the idea of having someone who will take care of you again? Someone who will make your life comfortable while you figure out your next move?" He did not answer immediately, which was answer enough. "I want you to leave now," I said firmly. "Karen, take your settlement offer with you. I do not want your money, and I do not want your promises. I have built something here that is mine, something that matters. I will not give that up to go back to being your supporting character." Martin stood slowly, his face a mixture of hurt and anger. "So that is it, 30 years together, and you are just going to throw it all away. You threw it away when you chose Brittany over our marriage. I am just refusing to pick up the pieces for you." He moved toward the door, then stopped. "You know what your problem is, Karen? You have gotten bitter. The woman I married would have forgiven me." His words were meant to hurt, to make me doubt myself. A few months ago, they might have worked. But I had learned too much about my own strength to be manipulated by his disappointment. "You are right," I said calmly. "The woman you married would have forgiven you, taken you back, and spent the rest of her life wondering when you would leave again. But I am not that woman anymore, and I am grateful for that." Martin left without another word, taking his settlement papers and his empty promises with him. After the door closed, I sat in the quiet of my office, waiting to feel something: sadness, regret, doubt. But all I felt was relief. My phone buzzed with a text from Charles. "Dinner tonight. I have some ideas for expanding the job training program." I smiled as I typed back, "I will be there." This was my life now: meaningful work, genuine respect, a future I was creating for myself. Martin had done me a favor by showing me what I had lost, but more importantly, he had shown me how much I had gained. 2 days after Martin's visit, I was working late at the foundation when Thomas appeared in my doorway with a concerned expression. "Mrs. Mitchell, your ex-husband is back. He is quite insistent about seeing you, and he seems agitated." Through my office window, I could see Martin pacing in the waiting area. Even from a distance, his distress was obvious. His hair was disheveled, his expensive suit wrinkled, and his movements had the jerky quality of someone running on desperation and too much caffeine. "It is all right, Thomas," I said quietly. "Send him in, but please stay close." Martin burst through my door before Thomas could properly announce him. His face flushed and his eyes wild. This was not the composed, somewhat contrite man who had visited me earlier in the week. This was someone on the edge of collapse. "We need to talk," he said without preamble, his voice shaking. "You are welcome to sit down," I replied calmly, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. But he remained standing, his hands clenched at his sides. "You have to take me back, Karen. I am begging you." The naked desperation in his voice should have moved me. Once it would have, but I had learned to see past his emotional manipulations to the calculations underneath. "Martin, you are clearly upset. Maybe you should go home." "I do not have a home." The words exploded out of him. "They foreclosed on the house yesterday. The house, Karen, our house." I felt a small pang of sadness for the home where we had built our life together. But it was distant, like mourning something that had belonged to different people in a different lifetime. "I am sorry to hear that," I said, and I meant it, "but I do not understand what you expect me to do about it." Martin dropped into the chair, his head in his hands. "It is all gone. Everything. The house, the savings, the retirement accounts." Brittany. She did not just spend money on herself. She had debts, gambling debts, credit cards I did not know about. She used my name, my credit. The picture was becoming clearer. Martin had not just been supporting a young mistress with expensive tastes. He had been unknowingly funding her addictions. "When did you find out?" I asked quietly. 2 weeks ago, he said. After she left, the bills started coming in, collection agencies calling. I tried to handle it myself, thought I could work something out, but... He looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed and desperate. "I need help, Karen. I need you." There it was, the real reason for his return. Not love, not remorse, but financial necessity. I should have felt vindicated, but instead, I just felt tired. "You want me to help you financially? Not just money," he said quickly. "Though yes, I know you are doing well here, and I thought maybe, but it is more than that. I need stability. I need someone who knows me, who understands. Someone who will clean up your mess," I interrupted. Martin's face flushed. "That is not what this is." "Is it not?" I cut in sharply. "You come here talking about love and second chances, but what you are really asking is for me to rescue you from the consequences of your choices again. I made mistakes. You made choices, Martin. You chose to leave our marriage. You chose to empty our accounts. You chose to trust someone you barely knew with our financial future. These were not mistakes, Martin. They were decisions." Martin stood abruptly, beginning to pace again. "Fine. Yes, I made bad decisions. But we are married. We were married, I corrected quietly. We can fix that. We can remarry. We can? Martin, stop. My voice was firm enough to cut through his increasingly frantic words. Listen to yourself. You are not asking me to take you back because you love me. You are asking because you need someone to take care of you. That is what marriage is. He snapped, his desperation finally turning to anger. People taking care of each other. I took care of you for 27 years. You took care of me. I stood up, feeling my own anger rise for the first time since he had walked back into my life. I cooked your meals, cleaned your house, managed your social calendar, and organized your entire life while you worked and played golf and complained about being tired. When exactly were you taking care of me? I provided for you. I gave you a home security. You gave me dependency, I corrected. You made sure I could not survive without you, and then you used that as leverage whenever I disagreed with something you wanted. Martin stared at me as if I had spoken in a foreign language. Where is this coming from? You never complained before. Because I did not know I had the right to complain. I thought that was just what marriage was supposed to be. Me making your life easier while you made all the decisions. And now you think you are better than that? Better than me? The question hung in the air between us, heavy with years of unspoken resentment. Martin's face twisted with a mixture of hurt and fury, as if my refusal to rescue him was a personal betrayal. I think I deserve better than being someone's fallback plan, I said quietly. A soft knock at the door interrupted us. Charles entered, his presence immediately shifting the energy in the room. He was dressed casually, khakis and a sweater, but carried himself with the quiet authority that came from genuine confidence. Karen, I apologize for interrupting. Thomas said you might need... He stopped as his eyes took in Martin's agitated state and my tense posture. Is everything all right? Martin straightened instantly, his salesman instincts kicking in despite his unraveling composure. And you are Charles Whitmore, he replied calmly, stepping into the room. I am the foundation's founder. And you must be Martin. Something flickered across Martin's face. Recognition. Maybe calculation. Whitmore. As in Whitmore Properties. Whitmore Industries. Among other things, Charles confirmed, his tone measured but firm. Karen has been invaluable to our organization. Truly irreplaceable. Martin's eyes darted between Charles and me, and I could practically see the wheels turning in his head. How well do you two know each other? He asked suspiciously. Well enough, Charles said. His tone was pleasant, but there was an edge beneath it, the kind of calm that warned Martin to be careful about his next words. I see. Martin's voice took on a nasty tone I recognized from his worst moments during our marriage. And I suppose you think you know all about our relationship, about what we meant to each other? I know that Karen is one of the most compassionate, intelligent, and resilient people I have ever had the privilege to meet, Charles replied evenly. I know that she has built something remarkable here in just a few months, and I know that anyone who could not see her worth does not deserve her. Martin's face went red. You do not know anything about our marriage, about what we built together, about what she owes me. What she owes you? Charles' voice remained calm, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. What exactly do you think she owes you 27 years of my life? Martin snapped. 27 years of providing for her, supporting her. Charles stepped closer to him, his presence suddenly commanding and intimidating, despite his composed demeanor. Is that what you call it when you empty every account, leave her with nothing, and force her into a homeless shelter? Martin's mouth fell open. She told you about that? She told me about your cruelty? Yes, Charles said, his voice low but sharp. She also told me about your selfishness, your betrayal, and your complete disregard for her well-being. Did you really think she would keep your secrets now? Wait just a minute. No, you wait. Charles' voice was still quiet, but it carried the weight of absolute authority, the kind that could silence a room without effort. You destroyed this woman's life because you were bored with your marriage. You left her with nothing because you were too much of a coward to face the consequences of your choices honestly. And now you have the audacity to come here demanding that she clean up another mess you have made. Martin looked between Charles and me, his face cycling through confusion, anger, and growing realization. How much has she told you? Everything that matters, Charles replied, including the fact that you are here because your latest relationship has left you bankrupt, not because you have suddenly realized what you lost. The words hit Martin like physical blows. His shoulders sagged, and for a moment he looked like the broken old man he was becoming. It is not like that, he said weakly. Is it not? Charles reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and scrolled for a moment before showing Martin the screen. Foreclosure notice filed 8 days ago. Bankruptcy petition filed 6 days ago. Credit rating dropped to subprime 4 days ago. Should I continue? Martin's face went white. How do you... I make it my business to know about threats to people I care about. Charles said simply, Did you really think you could come here and manipulate Karen without anyone checking into your situation? I stared at Charles, realizing that he had been protecting me in ways I had not even known I needed protection. The thought should have bothered me. I had worked so hard to become independent, but instead, it felt like the action of someone who truly cared about my well-being. Martin slumped back into his chair, the fight going out of him completely. I do not have anywhere else to go. For the first time since he had walked back into my life, I felt genuine pity for him. Not the manipulative emotion he had tried to evoke, but real sadness for a man who had destroyed everything good in his life and was now facing the consequences alone. Martin first said gently, I am sorry you are going through this. I really am. But I cannot be your solution. Why not? His voice was barely above a whisper. We were good together once. Once, I said quietly. A long time ago. But that was before you taught me that I was dispensable. Before you showed me that your love came with conditions I could never meet. Martin looked up at me, and for a moment, I saw a flash of the man I had fallen in love with 30 years ago, young, uncertain, trying to figure out how to be an adult in a complicated world. I loved you, he said quietly. I know, I replied softly. And I loved you too. But love is not enough when it is not paired with respect, with loyalty, with basic human decency. Martin nodded slowly, acceptance finally beginning to replace desperation in his expression. He stood up, straightening his wrinkled suit jacket. I guess this is goodbye then. I guess it is. He walked to the door, then turned back one last time. For what it is worth, I am glad you found something that makes you happy. I am glad you are not the woman I left behind. After he was gone, Charles and I stood in the quiet of my office, the weight of finality settling around us. Are you all right? Charles asked. I thought about it honestly. Yes, I said, surprised by how true it felt. I think I really am. 1 year later, I stood in the main hall of the Margaret Whitmore Foundation for Community Services during our annual benefit dinner, watching as 300 guests mingled beneath crystal chandeliers and bid on silent auction items. The event had raised over $220,000 for our programs. But more importantly, it had brought together people who truly cared about making a difference. Nervous Charles appeared beside me, elegant in his black tuxedo, but wearing the warm smile that had become so familiar over the past months. Excited, I corrected smoothing the skirt of my navy blue dress, a far cry from the shelter clothes I had worn the first time we met. Look at this turnout. Margaret Ann would have been thrilled. She would have been thrilled about you, Charles said quietly. About what you have built here. Over the past year, the foundation had expanded beyond anything I had imagined possible. We had opened a job training center, a childcare facility for mothers in transition, and a financial literacy program. But the project I was most proud of was the mentorship program that paired women who had rebuilt their lives with those just beginning their journey. Emily from the shelter was now one of our most effective mentors, having completed nursing school and found her own apartment. Mrs. Mitchell, a young woman, approached Angela, one of our recent program graduates. I wanted to thank you again for everything. I start my new job as a medical assistant on Monday. You did the work, Angela, I said, smiling. I just provided some guidance. As Angela walked away, beaming with confidence, I felt the deep satisfaction that had become a constant in my new life. This was what purpose felt like, not just existing, but mattering. Karen, a familiar voice, made me turn. Patricia from the shelter stood nearby, wearing a simple but elegant black dress and holding the arm of a distinguished gentleman with silver hair. Patricia, you look wonderful. She beamed. I wanted you to meet my husband, George. We married last month. George shook my hand warmly. Patricia has told me so much about you, about how you helped her navigate the system when her disability payments were delayed. We helped each other, I said, meaning it. That is what family does. After they moved on, Charles and I found ourselves alone again near the windows overlooking the city. The lights of Minneapolis stretched out below us, each one representing lives being lived, dreams being pursued, stories unfolding. I have something for you, Charles said, reaching into his jacket pocket. Charles, you have already given me so much. This is not from me. He handed me an envelope with my name written in shaky handwriting. It arrived this morning. I opened it carefully, unfolding a single sheet of paper. The return address made my breath catch. It was from Martin. Dear Karen, I hope this finds you well and happy. I wanted you to know that I have spent the past year in a treatment program, not just for the financial mess I made, but for the emotional and psychological issues that led me to make such destructive choices. I will not bore you with details. The letter continued, but I wanted you to know that I understand now what I did to you, and why my recent attempts to win you back were just more of the same selfish behavior. You deserve so much better than what I gave you both during our marriage and after. I am writing to tell you that I am doing better. I found a job as a bookkeeper for a small nonprofit. The pay is not much, but it is honest work, and I am learning to live within my means. More importantly, I am learning to live with myself. I saw the newspaper article in the Minneapolis Star-Tribune about the foundation's expansion and your promotion to executive director. I am proud of you, Karen, proud of the woman you have become, though I suspect you were always that woman. I was just too self-centered to see it. I do not expect or want a response to this letter. I just wanted you to know that I am grateful for the lesson you taught me when you refused to rescue me. It was the hardest gift anyone has ever given me, but it was exactly what I needed. I hope you are as happy as you deserve to be. With respect and gratitude, Martin." I read the letter twice, feeling an unexpected lightness in my chest. Not joy exactly, but a sense of completion, as if the last painful chapter of my old life had finally found its proper ending. "Good news?" Charles asked gently. "Closure," I said, folding the letter carefully. "Finally." Charles nodded understanding without needing explanation. Over the past year, our friendship had deepened into something I was still learning to name. It was not romance. We were both too aware of our respective journeys to rush into anything complicated. But it was companionship, mutual respect, and a shared sense of purpose that felt more solid than any relationship I had ever experienced. "There is something else," Charles said. "Something I have been wanting to discuss with you." "Oh," he smiled, but I detected a hint of nervousness. "I have been thinking about expanding the foundation's reach, opening branches in other cities. That would mean more travel, more responsibility, more opportunity to help people." "I finished your thought," I said softly. "What are you asking?" "I am asking if you would consider taking over as chief executive officer of the entire organization." I froze. It would mean a substantial salary increase to $160,000 per year and equity ownership in the foundation's properties, he continued. "But more than that, it would mean the freedom to expand our mission however you see fit." $160,000. A year ago, I had been grateful for free meals at the Minneapolis City Mission. Now, I was being offered the kind of position I had never even dared to imagine. Why me, I asked, though. Deep down, I was beginning to understand his answer. "Because you understand what it means to need help," Charles said gently. "And because you understand what it takes to rebuild a life. You have a vision for how we can do more than just provide temporary relief. We can create permanent transformation. And because Margaret Ann would have chosen you." I looked around the room at the celebration of hope and second chances, at the faces of people who had found their way back from the brink. A year ago, I had been one of them. Now I was in a position to ensure that others would have the same opportunity. "I accept," I said. Charles's smile was radiant. "Margaret Ann always said that angels come disguised as ordinary people doing extraordinary things." "I think she was talking about you." "She was talking about all of us," I corrected softly. "Everyone who chooses kindness when they could choose selfishness. Everyone who helps when they could walk away." As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, I found myself standing once again by the windows. But this time, I was not looking at the city lights. I was watching Charles say goodbye to the last of the donors, his easy grace and genuine warmth evident in every interaction. "Penny, for your thoughts," he asked, rejoining me. "I was thinking about train stations," I said, smiling, "about how sometimes the worst moment of your life leads directly to the best." "No regrets, then?" I considered the question seriously. A year ago, I had lost everything I thought mattered: my marriage, my home, my financial security, my sense of identity. But in losing those things, I had found something more valuable: my own strength, my capacity for independence, my ability to matter in the world on my own terms. "No regrets," I said firmly. "Not about the divorce, not about the shelter, not even about giving you my last 15, especially not about that." Charles laughed. "Best 15 I ever received, best 15 I ever spent." As we prepared to leave, I took one last look around the offices of the Margaret Whitmore Foundation for Community Services. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to help people rebuild their lives from the ground up. But tonight, I was simply grateful. Grateful for the journey that had brought me here, for the people who had helped me along the way, and for the future I was building one act of kindness at a time. The snow was falling again as Charles and I walked to our cars, But this time, it did not feel like a punishment. It felt like a blessing, covering the world in fresh possibility. "Dinner tomorrow?" Charles asked with a small smile. "I have some ideas for the Phoenix expansion." "I will be there," I said. And for the first time in years, I knew exactly where there was not just a place, but a purpose. A home I had built for myself out of compassion and determination. As I drove through the quiet streets of Minneapolis, I thought about the woman who had stepped off that train a year ago with nothing but a suitcase and 85 cents. She had been broken, desperate, and convinced that her life was over. She had been wrong. Her life was just beginning. The radio played softly as I made my way home to the comfortable apartment I had earned through my own efforts, filled with furniture I had chosen and books I wanted to read. Tomorrow, I would wake up to work that mattered, surrounded by colleagues who respected me with a future limited only by my imagination. Martin had done me a favor when he destroyed our marriage, though it had taken me a year to see it. He had freed me to discover who I really was when I was no longer trying to be what someone else needed. He had forced me to find my own strength, my own voice, my own worth. And that 15 I had given to a stranger in a snowstorm. It had been the best investment I had ever made, not because of what it brought me, but because of what it taught me about the person I was meant to be. Sometimes, the end of one story is just the beginning of a better one. Sometimes, falling apart is really falling into place. And sometimes, when you think you have lost everything, you discover that you have actually found yourself. I pulled into my parking space and sat for a moment in the quiet car, watching snowflakes dance in the headlight beams. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new stories of transformation and hope. But tonight, I was simply content to be exactly where I was, free, purposeful, and finally, truly, home. Now I am curious about you, the one listening to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Share your thoughts below. And before you go, I am leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are favorites on this channel, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for staying with me until the end.